Welcome to the Weather Insights Podcast. I'm meteorologist Scott Pitney along with meteorologist Jeff Lindner. Jeff, good evening.
Yes, sir.
It is election night in the United States of America. Did you do early voting?
Absolutely. Early voting.
Yeah, I didn't.
I like to have my choices available to me.
That's the smart way to go. I waited till the last minute, but I got it done. Got my vote in. My vote counted. So here we go. But yeah, we're recording this so on Tuesday night, November 7th, 2023. It's been a while since we've sat together and chatted, and a lot has gone on with the weather, mainly for us anyway, down here in the Houston area. The heat dome is no moss.
You know, there's no shortage of weather.
No,
it changes all the time.
It happens every day. And
yes.
When you're a meteorologist, whether you work or not, weather, no pun intended, you're working 24/7. I mean,
absolutely.
At least that's what you're expected to do.
Absolutely.
We don't punch a clock. It's just weather happens all the time. So, yeah, so the heat dome is gone. Yep. We're getting cold fronts now. Well, the whole world's getting cold front, United States. And there's snow, the seasons are changing. Football is being played. Of course, the Major League Baseball ended when the Astros lost. And
yeah, what happened there?
Yeah, they lost. That was not a stellar ending.
So did we root for the Rangers after the Astros lost, or did we?
Just for monetary purposes,
okay.
If you're into that kind of thing. Okay. I don't hold any grudges against the Rangers. I actually, when they won, I was kind of happy for them. They finally got a World Series, because I remember what it felt like for us back in 2017 and winning all those championship series. After that, it's a lot of fun. It's good for the city. So good for them.
Yeah, good for them.
Good for them. But I can't wait to see him next year.
And Dusty retired.
Dusty retired. Yes, he did. What a stellar career.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Did you watch any post Astro baseball?
Did I watch the World Series?
Yes.
It's funny you ask. I did watch games 1 and 2, and then I got busy.
Oh.
And apparently so did a lot of other people, because it wasn't what I heard is it was not well watched.
Yes, the ratings I heard were not as good as when the Astros were playing. So I don't know why, but and that's just what I hear. I mean, I don't follow that kind of stuff.
But hey, the Texans are on the way up.
Let's talk some Texans for a minute. This is a weather show, but we can talk sports, because weather does affect sports, even in indoor stadiums.
Absolutely.
When you got to drive to the game and walk to the games and all that. But yeah, the Texans, they looked like they were going to be 3-5 that last 40 seconds, and then boom, they're 500. And speaking of Dallas, I noticed that the Cowboys, they've been getting a lot of talk. Well, they're 2.5 games out of first place in their division, where the Texans are only 2 games out.
Yeah,
I think there's something to be said for that.
Well, I tell you, it's an amazing experience in sport of what can happen in 46 seconds. But 46 seconds in an NFL game is like 10 minutes. So
oh yeah,
but just an incredible effort and a really great game.
Yeah. Oh, it was awesome. And I understand you were at the game.
I was at the game. And
what was it like?
Well, a lot of people left.
Sure.
At 50 seconds.
Oh, really?
Okay. Because I think Tampa Bay made a touchdown, and then that's it. We're done, because we're the Texans. And sure enough, we were all going crazy.
Yeah.
Because I think they made the touchdown in 40 seconds, 6 seconds left. And then, of course, we didn't have a kicker. And, oh, gosh, it was just...
Oh, let's talk about that. Yeah, I heard he made national news on one of the big stations. They talked about him. How cool is that?
Yeah.
I mean, that thing, that ball flight, that looked like a professional kick.
Yeah.
That did not look like a wide receiver kicked that football.
Yeah, well... I mean, you have to figure out a way to get it done, I guess, right?
Right. Now, were you surprised that they called for a kick because they waived going for the extra point and went for two, which made total sense. And they eventually they didn't get the 2 points, but they eventually got the single points by converting the two on the third try. But on that field goal kick, were you a little surprised they made that move and didn't go for it?
I got when everybody was, because I don't remember what quarter it was, third or fourth, but we were all there. You're kind of like, oh, give them a chance already.
Yeah.
Because at that point, I think we might have been up.
Yeah.
And this was a touchdown where we were up, and so hey, we're going to add either a point or possibly get 2 or maybe get 0. So I don't know. And then it all worked out.
But you can look at it. I mean, it was crucial to the win, right? They won by 2. So,
right. Yeah.
And yes, you are listening to the Weather Insights podcast. So don't turn your channel.
Sometimes it's the Sports Insight. I don't know. I mean, there's no shortage of sports podcasts.
It's just we just rename it to the Insights podcast.
It's just just talk about whatever we want.
Yeah. So yeah, there was that, and now just a quick note about, since we're talking about football, just one last thing about my Cougars, because that was, U of H was pre-meteorology school, and they, there's not too much to say about them, but at first year in the Big 12, they've had some very exciting games. I will say that.
Yeah. Same thing with A&M. They're
gosh.
really great season for them. They're banging it up this year.
Yeah. So anyway,
typical A&M season.
Well, you want to talk some weather?
Yeah.
Okay. Whether or not, here we go. Where do you want to start? It's been an active hurricane season.
It has been. So I think we've covered this. I don't know, when did we start this? In July?
Yeah,
it was like in July,
plus or minus. Yeah,
July or August, in the middle of the death heat.
Yeah.
And we had this conversation about, is it going to be active or is it going to be inactive? Because there was a lot of back and forth early on about, is the El Nino going to result in an inactive season, or is this super hot Atlantic going to compensate and result in an active season? And so, we have our answer now. We still have a month to go. Hurricane season doesn't end actually until November 30th, but for the most part, the season's probably done. Minus a storm out there. But we ended up with 20 named storms, including a storm in January, which made 20. So we had 19 in the season plus 1 in January. So 20 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. A major hurricane is 115 miles an hour sustained or greater. And so, and I still kind of, because, I was definitely on the El Nino side, right? I was the El Nino is going to win out, and I still kind of think El Nino won in some degrees. If you look at the named storms, we got the numbers, but they were all out in the subtropical-ish tropical Atlantic, kind of east of the Caribbean, northeast of the Caribbean, and where you would typically expect your El Nino detriment to the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. It was very quiet. As a matter of fact, we only had 2 or 3 storms in the Gulf. Adelia into Florida. We had Tropical Depression number 2, like in May, which did nothing. And then we had Harold, which moved into South Texas. So we only had 3.
Yeah.
And minus Adelia, it was really nothing.
Yeah.
And virtually nothing in the Western Caribbean.
Yeah.
And so, El Nino kind of won, if you will, in the western part of the basin, the Gulf of Mexico, the Western Caribbean, the Bahamas, kind of west, if you will, of 75 west.
Yeah.
And that really protected the U.S. this year. We just didn't have a lot of really even threats, minus Adelia. And most of this turned northward out in the Atlantic. A lot of weak high pressure out and around the Bermuda, Azores area that allowed a lot of these systems to turn northward and not pose an impact to really the Caribbean, Bahamas, Central America, or the U.S. coast. So, this is a classic, like we always talk about. We talk about this all the time at the start of the season. The numbers, if you can have 20, as we see here, and it's virtually a non-memorable season for most of us. Or you can get hit.
Yeah.
And that's a memorable season for you. So we're gonna keep doing it because that's what we do. And this whole number of named storms at the beginning of the year is such a entrenched portion now of hurricane season preparedness and all that kind of stuff that we're gonna keep doing it. But in the whole scheme of things, it's where they go and how bad they are.
Yeah, and it doesn't change the preparedness.
Oh no, yeah,
yeah, and we've had those seasons with 5 or 6 storms, but then you have one monster hurricane, Andrew, for example. Yeah, and you can see it right here on this map. Very clean over here. Shear, a lot of shear during the whole season coming out, off the Pacific, and then and just like you were saying, then you had all the warmer than normal SST surface sea temperatures here, and then the weak high allowing that to turn. Now, give Harold another 12 or 24 hours, we could have been looking at something totally different.
Yeah, and just for reminder, Harold was a tropical storm, a strong tropical storm that went in deep South Texas around Kingsville back in late August, and really helped with the southern portion of the state and the valley up in the Southwest Texas with the drought going on down there. But up here around I-10, we didn't really get much from Harold. But Harold was really one of those. It was getting its act together as it was coming into the coast, which they typically do on the South Texas coast. We've seen this time and time again, west or west-northwest moving tropical systems approaching Texas. The lower Texas coast, middle Texas coast tend to spin up because the waters are good in that area. The shear tends to be light because you're obviously going to have a big high to your north with that track going on. And then the curvature of the coast. So if you look at the Texas coast, it kind of makes a right angle, which if you think about something spinning, it's along the curvature of the coast. So it helps tighten to some degree that low level center as it comes in. But I agree. You give Harold another 12, 24 hours, we've probably been easily looking at a hurricane, maybe a little bit more than that.
Yeah. But thank goodness for the beneficial rain. And now we're all getting it here in Texas. And so I haven't looked at the latest drought report. I mean, we're still in a lot of areas still in a drought situation. I think Lake Travis is still
way down.
Yeah, 39% or something like that. Right. So there's still work to be done, but you get a few weeks of fronts moving through and just some training type storms. We've got a system coming in for this weekend. I don't think it'll be anything like 5, 6, 7 inches of rain, but it could. We get the jet hanging out over us, and we're in for kind of a cool, damp weekend. And we've had that kind of beneficial rain, that light rain that's the ground. The ground is soaking it in.
Right. And we'll talk a little bit more about El Nino as we go along here. But this what's coming up late Thursday through maybe in the middle of next week is a very El Nino pattern. You get that enhanced southern branch subtropical jet stream, western Gulf of Mexico coastal trough low, and you just lay the light rain, moderate rain, day after day, locked in the 50s. I mean, you couldn't write a more classic El Nino pattern. The question is, does it continue? Because so far, I'm getting ahead of myself, but so far, this pattern hasn't really locked in.
Yeah. Because October was not that.
It was not.
There were, some storms that finally came through and started mixing things up. But I don't know what our official rainfall ended up being for October. But I think we're about an inch behind.
It was below average.
Yeah.
And
5.1 in.
I don't know what it was, but I know it was below average.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to get out of drought, below average ain't going to get you out of drought. It's going to help. I mean, obviously we've made some progress, but if we're trying to actually get out of the drought, we got to have above average rainfall to pull us out.
Yeah. So we shall see what happens. So that's the Atlantic. Now we had something interesting anomaly over in the Pacific. Let's talk about Otis a second.
Yeah, let's talk about Otis.
Otis. Couple of things. First Cat 5 to hit the western coast of Mexico, and extremely fast intensification, unprecedented.
in a highly populated area
Highly
of
populated.
Acapulco.
Yeah. Yeah.
A million-ish people, which was, by all means, is a major metro location. But just a forecasting nightmare it was. I mean, you just you look at that, and you look at the intensification that happened. You look at the forecast failures that we saw in the modeling, and there's obviously going to be a lot of research into why the global models didn't at least show something. There's some hints that Otis was so tiny that the global models are too broad in resolution to pick up such a tiny vortex. The answer is probably a combination of a lot of things, like it is in most of these situations. It's not one thing that causes this, but I think some of it, the intensity was off, so the track was off. It was too far to the left, kind of taking it out to sea because it was weak in the models. And as it began to intensify, it pulled further to the north. Now, I will say some of the regional hurricane models, especially some of the newer ones, did catch on the day that Otis made landfall. They were still behind, but they did start to kind of catch on and catch up. And a couple of them were bringing it in at around 145 miles an hour, which was still weak compared to what it came in as. But at least they were catching on to, hey, there's something here. And some of that may have been because of the recon data that was put in there. But we can talk a little bit about the timeline here, because I did look at this. And it's not like Otis just happened. It's not like we didn't know it was there. It was clearly there, because the first advisory was issued at 10 a.m. on the 22nd. So that was Sunday, the 22nd. And Otis made landfall at 1:25 a.m. on the 25th. Okay, so just short of about 72 hours. So this was a 72-hour type storm. The the tropical storm watches were issued 48 hours out. So again, watches were in place. Yes, it was for a tropical storm, but watches were in place. So I would hope at least people knew there was something there. Now, they weren't expecting a Cat 5, but hey, there is a storm out there off the coast.
They're paying attention, hopefully.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then the hurricane warning was issued at 4 a.m. on the 24th, which is about 21 hours before landfall. But even when that hurricane warning was issued, there was still no big indication that this was going to be more than 75, 80 miles an hour. And now take Acapulco out of this and put Houston in it.
Right.
And what in the world are we doing with 21 hours of prep time?
Houston, New Orleans, any major city.
Miami.
Yeah.
Tampa.
Yeah.
It's just an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
And I think the Hurricane Center said it best. This was a forecasting nightmare from so many aspects, and a kind of a spectacular failure, if you will, of the modeling. We have the human forecasters that are looking at stuff, and they can see the forecast that they have put out is starting to go in a different direction, and so you can play that catch up, and you can increase the wind speeds, but from the time that an advisory package or a forecast is issued to the time somebody hears it, digests the information, and starts making decisions based on what they just heard, this was happening so quick, you're already changing it.
Yeah.
You're saying, no, now you're looking at a Cat 2. Then now you're looking at a Cat 4. This is happening in the span of hours.
Yeah. Well, and I a lot of people were sleeping when these rapid changes were happening. I mean, I woke up myself in Acapulco's on Central Time. So it's the same time, and I wake up and what, Cat 5?
Yeah.
I mean, and you mentioned the recon flights. So there was one recon flight. I think they took 2 passes. There's no Doppler radar, so limited data going into the model. How much did that play into this, do you think?
Yeah. I don't, this is a great question. This is somebody, a modeler, probably more than all these folks that are way more advanced in physics and fluid dynamics than me.
Yeah.
But I feel the recon was in there late morning, I believe. Maybe it was into the afternoon. I don't remember exactly, but and it takes a while to get that ingested into the modeling data. It usually takes a good six or even 12 hours to ingest that in. So there wasn't time for that with this particular situation. Had the recon been out there earlier, and it's not typical for U.S. Recon to fly Eastern Pacific cyclones unless they think there's a threat to the coast of Mexico.
Yeah.
Initially, they did not think there was a threat to the coast of Mexico.
Yeah.
They thought it was going to stay weak and sheared and well off the coast, and so they didn't task recon. And just so everybody understands how this works, you can't just say, okay, in 2 hours you're going to put an Air Force plane out there and fly this. This has to be planned out, fueled. Staffing has to be appropriated for it, and all this kind of stuff. And my assumption is they flew probably from Biloxi on this one. And so, if you look at Atlantic Basin and other Eastern Pacific Basin storms, we don't have recon a lot of times. And the models seem to grasp what's happening to some degree out there. And I think a lot of this is because this was so tiny. The global models just didn't see it very well. They couldn't pick it up very well in the pressure field. And sometimes we're just going to struggle really with these rapid intensification phases, and this was epic. I mean, this was some of the most rapid intensification we've ever seen. And there's nothing that really stood out screaming as to why. The sea surface temperatures are warm, but they're always warm down here.
Yeah.
83, 84, 85 degrees. Okay. All right. The wind shear, there was a little bit of weak easterly shear, and it kind of abated a little bit because of some technical jet stream stuff that was going on off to the northwest, which we have seen before with Gulf of Mexico rapid intensifying hurricanes. Both Michael and Ian were both in the same pattern where they're in the venting portion or the upward motion portion of the approaching jet.
Yeah.
And that helped kind of accelerate the development.
Yeah.
So there's probably some stuff that can be researched and looked at in pattern recognition, probably for October hurricanes, late mid-September hurricanes, when you're interacting with troughs, mid-latitude troughs. You're obviously probably not going to get that in August. You could, but it's the same exact thing we saw with Michael and Ian. Same exact thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can look at that ventilation, perfect ventilation, and you can look at the sea surface temperatures and everything, but still, with that observational data, how can you possibly think that this can go to a Cat 5 in 12 hours? It's just I think that's the burning question that this thing will be analyzed to death, and for good reason. We've got, because as you pointed out earlier, this can happen to a Houston where we get those storms that sort of like this one meandered off the coast. They're hung up with a front or something like that, and then boom, you just get the perfect scenario, and they blow up and eventually move. Well, Harvey wasn't too far from that. That was faster, I think, intensified faster than the models. Once it came off the Yucatan, I think it was in 4 broken pieces, and there was a 6-hour satellite loop where you just saw that thing started twisting up. And I think NHC at the time, going back 6 years, but NHC at the time was officially saying Cat 1 maybe by landfall, and very quickly changed that to Cat 3, if I remember right. I mean, you probably have a better handle.
Yeah, I mean, and I remember, they were explicit. They were pretty aggressive on the Harvey forecast for the Hurricane Center. They tend to be conservative,
right?
But honestly, what we've seen in the last 6 or 7 years, 17 probably maybe started some of this, is these in close, rapid intensification leading up to and through landfall. A lot of people back in, if you remember back to Katrina and Rita and all those other storms, these storms always weaken when they come in, and then Rita and Katrina did weaken. They were big honking Cat 5s out in the Gulf, and they kind of became these shells of these big hurricanes when they hit the coast, but they weren't nowhere near what they were at their peak.
Yeah.
And what we've seen recently is the storms peaking right at or right before landfall,
Yeah.
which obviously is going to bring devastating impacts to the coast then. But one of the things we haven't talked about with Otis is the population this went into. This went into 1 million people
Yeah.
in a highly populated small area around a bay, with mid and high rise hotels all over the place. I think there's something like 600 hotels in Acapulco. I never knew there were that many.
Wow.
And we've always kind of wondered what is a high, a 160, 165 Cat 5 wind speed wise going to do to these high rise buildings, because wind increases with height.
Yeah.
So these upper floors were probably easily sustained, 160, 170 gusting.
There was a large tornado.
Who knows, 200 miles an hour.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know the building codes on the southern coast of Mexico. I would think there's some sort of probably earthquake coding down there because they have earthquakes and stuff like that. But obviously hurricanes are not frequent, and nothing close to this has ever happened before. And when you look at the pictures, it's building after building, and they're just blown completely through. I mean, you can literally look from one side straight through the building to the other side. All the contents are blown out of the building. Whatever was in there is all blown through. Very similar to what you'd see with storm surge washing through the low floors. Everything in the upper and mid floors was just shredded and pushed out of the building. So all the glass, all the walls. I mean, the only thing left is concrete and steel.
Yeah.
On a lot of these buildings.
Yeah.
And so very interesting. I mean, imagine that in a major metro U.S. city.
It's a mess,
yeah,
to say the least.
And the thing about it is you've heard very little about it.
Yeah.
This is not a big story. I don't know why. But there's been very little coverage of this, and likely the humanitarian crisis that is happening on the southern coast of Mexico with this, because it's if you're thinking of something as a mid and high rise, imagine the lower lying and lower income residential structures and what they look like. And there's also topography here. And so winds increase with height.
Yeah.
And so you were slamming a lot of that wind into the mountains and the mountainsides. And I can't imagine that the local home stood much of a chance here.
Tons of trees and just all kinds of objects to fall on homes and that kind of thing. Another thing kind of different too is because the water is much deeper approaching the coast, at least they didn't have to deal with storm surge. That wasn't the big story with this one, but the wind, as you pointed out, certainly was. And yeah, I mean, Acapulco, it's one of the biggest tourist destinations, so it's a place that a lot of Americans go to. I'm frankly surprised there isn't more coverage as well down there. Yeah, because it's going to be a while to get all that cleaned up. But yeah, that was a strange phenomenon.
Yeah, well, it just goes to show what can happen, and we talk about this all the time. This is a nightmare for us here too. I mean, there's no way to mince it. If we were to face something like this, we would be in a world of hurt.
Yeah, I mean, because you obviously have a much better, more insight on this question. But how many people can you get off the coast in that short a period of time in Galveston or anywhere? New Orleans, anywhere that's highly populated.
I mean, if I put myself in the situation and I'm looking at 21 hours, the hurricane warning is issued, but it's a hurricane warning for a category 1. We're probably still not doing a lot.
No,
because a category 1 hurricane, we don't evacuate a whole lot for.
Yeah.
So again, the time clock's ticking away. And the window's so short by the time the realization is, oh my goodness. I don't know. At that point, it would probably be not the best option to tell people to leave, because they're going to get caught in their cars and on the highways and stuff like that. You're going to have to try to find some of the highest ground to get to, ground, building, however you want to put it, and get up. You just got to get up. But, the only good thing about a lot of these big time rapid intensifying storms is they tend to be very, very small.
Yeah.
And so these small centers don't bring a lot of water with them.
Yeah.
Because they don't, the storm surge is really a function of a lot of times the wind field, how big that wind field is. And so you can have an Ike, a Cat 2 Hurricane Ike, bring a massive surge, and you could have this Otis, and I bet the surge would probably be on the order of 6 or 7, 8, 10 feet at the max. So this would by far be just an absolutely devastating, catastrophic wind event for us.
Yeah.
That we couldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
It would be very, very hard to wrap our heads around what's getting ready to happen to us facing this.
Yeah. I would think that your mandatory evacuation areas are going to be much smaller because you just don't have time to get that many people out. And like you said, it would be a smaller storm. So that's the only thing you have working for you. But then you've got to be very precise in, predicting landfall to know exactly where those mandatory areas are going to be.
I mean, the best thing we could do at this point, we'd probably do mandatory West End, mandatory Bolivar. Bolivar can probably get most people out. And you're just trying to get people back behind the seawall.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, that's at this point, that's what we're doing. We're trying to get you off the West End.
Yeah.
You're so vulnerable down there. And then maybe the Kemah, Seabrook, Shore Acres area in Southeast, which is super vulnerable. And we're saying you just got to get to Pasadena.
Yeah.
Or LaPorte or somewhere up.
Yeah.
This whole going to Austin, that's all out the window.
Right.
Because if you're on the road when this hits, I mean, this is something that can flip your car off the road.
Yeah.
I mean, these types of winds can move vehicles. And so the last thing we want is stop traffic on all of our freeways when this comes in.
Yeah.
And so this would be a back of the pad, no plan really. Where are we going to get people to and shelter them, and then we'll deal with it after, how we get people out of here, because we're obviously, after something like this, it's very hard to support normal functions of our daily lives.
Yeah.
Basic services are gone.
Yeah. I think that's a great call for Galveston Island. Just get behind the seawall. That's what it's there for. I mean, it's 17 feet. So, it's already ridden out quite a few large storms. But yeah, it's all those other areas that aren't so clear, that don't have seawalls, that you don't have to go super far inland, but in an evacuation situation when the freeways are crowded, and as you said, don't get in any high profile vehicles. Think about that. You're probably going to get caught in the wind at some point. And something to think about. So everybody listening, this can happen. This rapid intensification, it has happened, and it could happen to us. I think that's the key message.
And this is why we always say, anytime there's a storm out there, and again, there was a storm out there 3 days before landfall here. It's not like this just showed up overnight. There was a storm out there. It was weak, but this is why we always say, when there's something out there, you have to check back on the forecast frequently.
Right.
2, 3, 4 times a day. The advisory packages are issued every 6 hours. 10-4, 10-4. You check back at those times for the latest information.
From trusted sources, not from social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, social media be going, I mean, they couldn't even make this one up.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Well, be interesting to see what comes of this, the studies from this storm and how it's applied to future planning for other big metropolitan areas. Well, we dabbled into climate a little bit earlier. Shall we jump back into outlooks?
Yes.
And El Nino?
Yes.
All right, let's do it.
Well, it's still there.
Yeah.
El Nino's still there. It hadn't gone away. And again, El Nino is just the warming of the sea surface temperatures out in the eastern and central Pacific. And so we earlier in the summer, we had a lot of warming, positive anomalies, 4 or 5 degrees off the coast of South America, what we call Nino Region 1 and 2. So this is south of the Mexican coast and west of the South American coast. And that region has kind of cooled a little bit, and the stronger positive anomalies plus 1.5-ish, maybe getting up around 2, have shifted a little bit further to the west toward the Central Pacific. And so this El Nino is translating or developing, if you will, as we're going through it, obviously. But one of the things that has been very slow is the water's hot, but there's something called to simplify this, the Nino index, and I'm going to just use those words, and that's the coupling of the sea surface, the warm sea surface, with the atmosphere. And so you get all this warm water, and it changes where thunderstorms develop, and it changes pressures and all this kind of stuff. And so it changes the orientation of jet streams and the high pressures and low pressures. And that's the part of this that we've been sort of missing up until very recently. And so we haven't seen, especially here in Houston, Texas, Southern Plains, a very traditional El Nino response this fall so far. You know, typically an El Nino October here would be relatively wet and cool. And we didn't really have that. We had one sort of episode there before Halloween where we got wet and, you know, a decent cold spell. But that seems to be starting to change now. We're seeing that index increasingly indicate that the atmosphere is coupling very well with this El Nino. And I think going forward, especially here into November and December, we're going to see that southern branch storm track become more active, the subtropical jet become more active. And that's where we start to get the systems that come down through here, and the increasing potential for more widespread wetting rainfall. And you know, it's not so much, you know, I've heard so many people, between the acorns falling and the squirrels having extra fur and their dogs shedding hair, that this winter is going to be, you know, so cold down here. And I don't know if I see that. El Nino tends to be cool, but not the 21 winter storm cold, because it's a lot of days that are cloudy and in the 40s and 50s. And if you're cloudy, you're not gonna get that cold at night. So the lows are in the 40s, the highs are in the 40s, and it's drizzly and foggy and light rain. And if you want to get out of a drought, that's what we need. But you know, can I rule out a you know, an ice storm? Absolutely not. I think this year supports ice, kind of a freezing rain, because if you think about the warm air coming up from the subtropics, that's not a very favorable snow pattern. Yeah. And so you get this overrunning, and you get a really shallow layer of cold air near the surface. That's freezing rain. That's an ice pattern for us. Yeah. And so you know, it's how people look at it. Oh, it's a bad winter because we had an ice storm. Okay. That's one way to look at it. I look at a bad winter 21, where your pipes are breaking and you're without power for 4 days. Yeah. That's a bad winter to me. Yeah. And so I don't necessarily see if I see these big Arctic outbreaks this winter. And I think if the Arctic tries to come down, it's going to be pushed east with the flow from the southwest in the subtropics. And so rainy, cold, dreary, depressing. That's probably the winter. Yeah, the winter outlook.
When do you think you'll hear the first? Man, I'm sick of this rain, Jeff.
Well, I've already heard, and I couldn't believe it. I already heard last week, walking in to pick up my kid at school, it's too cold. And I couldn't help myself. I popped right around and I said, well, it was 109 like 3 times in September. So I feel like you've had your heat opportunities. And can we let the rest of us enjoy a break and let our air conditioners enjoy a break?
Yeah, those of us that look at the weather every day and remember quite well July and August. Yeah, this is nice.
Well, it's amazing that it's like it's already forgotten.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's like it didn't even happen.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this was horrid. It was absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, it was every bit, if not, and I think it was, in fact, warmer than 2011. Yeah. And I mean, that is a benchmark that is hard to beat, and we beat it.
And you don't want to beat it. Nobody. No, yeah. We were in Scandinavia the first 2 weeks of August, and it rained, and it never got above 73. It was mostly in the high 60s most of the time. I loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
Most people would call that miserable weather, but not coming out of the summer that we just had. So yeah, and I get questions like, "Hey, I heard there's going to be a big, people will want to know. I heard there's going to be a big ice storm or a specific, storm in January or around Christmas."
Where are they hearing it from?
I don't know.
Who's saying this stuff?
Yeah, this is like you said earlier. This is why you've got to watch the weather every day. These are These are trends when it's all said and done over a large period of time. But weather is, it happens now. It's and it changes all the time. And models get fed data and they change. So that's why you got to check in all the time.
Well, the big one that I've been because there's a story last night in the news about it is the acorns. The trees have been dropping all these acorns. It's the worst thing ever. And it has really no function looking forward. They were stressed so heavily during the drought and the heat. We had the same thing back in 2011. And they had a horticulturist on there and he said the same thing. And, but people equate pecans and I guess acorn. I don't know what else falls from our trees around here. To produce these horrible winters. And it's actually the other way around. It was the horrible summer that the tree thinks it's going to die, so it's producing all of this to continue its life with other trees.
It's trying to reproduce.
I feel like I'm.
Well, you got me thinking.
I don't even know what I'm saying anymore.
Well, no. Are you an almanac guy?
No.
Somebody gave me an almanac for my birthday. I'm like, that's kind of insulting to a meteorologist.
No.
But I'm going to read it because I just want to know what's in there. I've never read one.
The reason why I just can't get behind it is because it's so wishy-washy and vague. It's like Southern Plains is going to be cold with bouts of rain and a possible ice. Well, that's any winter. Right. You could say that any winter. Or summer's going to be hot with a thunderstorm and maybe a tropical threat. That's every summer in Texas. And so there's nothing really, to me, in there that's not far off of climatology. Yeah.
Well, I don't know the last time I've ever read a page from the almanac. I have no idea what's in there, but I figured it was stuff like that. So I'm going to find out. Maybe we'll talk about it on the next podcast.
Well, we could just read it. Yeah. We could just pull it out and read it.
That'll be a segment on the show, the almanac versus science.
Yeah. And then we should go back and read the month before.
Yes.
See how it did.
Yeah. Yeah. What were the observations compared to the almanac versus the Mets?
Well, I guarantee it's going to be right. Because it's so vague.
Yeah. See, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Well, in meteorology, we use a lot of fuzzy words.
That's true.
And
no absolutes.
The almanac is full of fuzzy words.
Yeah. Never any absolutes. Always maybe, might, probably, we'll see. Tune in tomorrow. That's what we say on TV.
Tune in tomorrow. We'll have all the answers.
We'll have a much better idea tomorrow. Check back. All right. So we got this little guy here from the, by the way,
CPC.
Just for, the image we were looking at of Otis, that was courtesy of YaleClimate.org, by the way. Okay. I got you covered, Yale. So yeah, this is CPC near normal. This is for the next, December to February, 3-month period. Yeah. Near normal temperatures, or a 30 to 40% chance it'll be near normal temperatures. These are not absolutes, of course. And wetter than normal.
Yeah.
For us. Above normal precipitation.
Well, I can't. I'm having a hard time in my older age now seeing. I think it's showing a 30 to 40% chance.
Yes.
Of above average precipitation, and so let's talk about this for a second because it's not, oh, I'm green, so that means we're going to flood. That's not what this means. What this means is your normal monthly precipitation, your precipitation for these 3 months is likely to be 40, 50%, maybe 60% chance of being above that.
Right. So
if we get 2 or 3 inches of rain in January, there's a 50 to 60% chance we're going to get above 2 to 3 inches of rain. This is how you describe this graphic or what it means. Of course, people just look at it like, oh, that looks bad.
Well, now that I've gotten enlarged and I can read it
Yeah.
as well, that was part of the problem. I mean, I've done this on TV, well, not on TV, but for the station's social media, these reports. But so I knew it was a percentage chance. It doesn't mean it's going to be wetter. It means there's a chance it's going to be wetter or equal chance. Well, it says it right there where there's no color, equal chances. But for our area, Houston, it's in this 50 to 60% chance that it'll be above normal precipitation for the period of December through February of 24. Yeah, issued October 19th. So,
I'd like to see those probabilities a little bit further west, deeper into the state.
I guess some of this Florida action here.
Yeah, some of the higher chances. What worries me a little bit here is you're seeing kind of equal chances in the Southwest U.S. along the Mexican border. Your more typical wetter El Niños tend to have a storm track Southern California through the Southwest, across Texas, and through the Southeast. And so the fact that this storm track possibly, just looking at this graphic, is a little bit further to the north, does make me pause a bit. And then what looks to be a very suppressed subtropical jet further to our south and east. So we don't want stuff to miss us out in the Gulf,
right,
and get us act together further east. And so, I think we'll definitely get rain, good rains this winter. Is it enough to bring something like Lake Travis up to full pool or even into their flood pool? We'll see. But we're definitely going in the right direction, and El Nino is still going to be around in the spring. It's not going to be completely gone if it trends in that direction, March, April, May, and that's when we can really get wet.
Yeah.
And that's when we can have big, big rains. And so, I still think at some point between now and next summer, we're probably going to end up facing some flood risk here in the state of Texas.
Yeah.
With this pattern.
Yeah. Yeah. I was looking, or maybe I said at the beginning, 80% chance that we'll see El Nino-like conditions. Where did I see that? There it is. Yeah.
Through May.
Yeah, through May. So that'll be interesting. Yeah, when spring gets here and we start seeing that. And we saw it with this system coming in this week. Yesterday, I believe, the QPF model showed a lot of the rain missing us south, the heavier rain missing us south, but that got adjusted today, and we're a little bit more in line, but we'll see. It'll probably adjust again tomorrow morning. So we talked about that. Temperatures, well,
Yeah, I'm not as big on the temperature. I mean, this is another classic ENSO look. Warm to the north, coolish to the south. We'll just have to see how many of those cloudy, dreary days we get.
Yeah.
And you got to remember, these are averages. So a sunny 85 averages out with a cloudy 45.
Yeah.
And when you take these month or 3 month averages, there can be lots of ups and downs in there.
Yeah.
It's just, do you get more of the cloudy and 45s, 50-degree days, and it brings your average down a little bit. It's been a while since we've seen winter like that. We've been in La Nina warm winters for the last few years, minus our big Arctic outbreaks.
Yeah.
Okay. I know people will say, "Oh, 21." I'm like, yes, but if you look at 21, minus a week in February, the whole winter was hot.
Yeah.
And so we'll see. This is kind of the opposite of that. It's the whole winter is probably going to be coolish and cloudy and clammy and rainy. And the 85 or 80-degree days are probably going to be more rare and sunny.
Yeah.
They're probably going to be more rare this winter.
So don't get mad at your weatherman when it's 85 degrees on Christmas Day and you say, I thought it was going to be cooler. It's an average.
It's all right. On the 26th, it'll be 40.
Yeah, right. Let's see. Where are we headed now?
One thing I will that we didn't really talk about is this type of pattern tends to support severe weather down here in the winter months. Most people don't think of severe weather, tornadoes, high winds, hail in December, January, February. But with that enhanced jet stream, that can lead to a lot of wind energy aloft that can bring some squall lines and stuff like that through here. So, we haven't dealt with severe weather, and I don't even know when.
1992, the Channel View
We had that
breakout.
in November.
November of 92.
Um,
The mini severe weather season. You think, we're only a couple of weeks from when that happened back in 92.
the 21st, right? Yeah.
I don't know. Was 92 a El Nino? Or, I don't remember. But yeah, the jet was low, and the lows were coming out of Baja and tracking, just like they would in the Midwest in the springtime.
Yeah. So we have to be careful and watch for that because we can get severe weather down here in these types of years. And like I said, we just haven't dealt with a lot of this recently. This past spring we were fairly fortunate; we didn't have a lot. I think the worst we had this summer was the thunderstorm up by Intercontinental that produced 97 mile an hour winds.
Yeah.
And, that was really our only severe episode we even had all summer.
Yeah.
And so it's been a while since we've had damaging winds, these little weak spin up tornadoes, EF0 tornado things, and hail. But this is certainly the type of pattern that can produce that as we go further along. And don't be fooled because it's not hot outside.
Yeah.
You can get severe weather even if it's kind of coolish.
Look at your dew points. Your dew points will tell you a lot. Although this front coming through this weekend, we're not getting a lot of the rain is on the backside of this front.
Yeah.
It's not that front that's, coming in and lifting everything.
No, it's shallow. Again, just like the Halloween front, it's very shallow.
Yeah.
Again, very typical of El Nino, shallow, cold air at the surface, overrun, or the warm air coming up over top of it. Behind the front, so you get a lot of your rain in the post-frontal air mass where it's cold, which really does cut down on the severe threat, and it also can cut down on the heavy rainfall threat, but it can lead to a lot of widespread light moderate rain, and that seems to be kind of the trend in the globals this afternoon for Thursday night and Friday morning, although I will say some of them were hammering away at that area between Houston and Victoria for some big rains. It'll be interesting to see what the regional smaller scale models say tomorrow for it.
Yeah, that did not change on QPF. I mentioned QPF changed for our area, but southwest of here, that stayed the same. Victoria Crossroads area, that's still in a heavy rain as far as QPF models going. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But decent chance of rain, at least 30-40% for the next week. Best chance is when the front passes.
Yeah, a lot will depend this weekend on this coastal trough low that forms and how far the front gets off the coast. If it gets too far off the coast, the dry air will win out and we'll probably end up being dry. And the models have kind of been back and forth on it. One run they'll say, "Oh, we're going to be dry," and the next run they hang the front up 30 miles off the coast, and we end up wet this weekend.
Yeah.
So
we will know for sure when we know for sure.
You'll know Saturday morning when you wake up.
By the next podcast, we will know. We will have all the answers by the end. Speaking of the next podcast.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to let
a legend.
I don't want to let the cat
just leave it at that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag, but tune in. It's going to be great.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So, thanks for listening, everybody. Jeff, always good to see you. Always fun to chat with you. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I don't know if we'll do another one before Thanksgiving or not, but if we don't, happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, well, I'd like to. I mean, this is kind of the slow time for me, so I don't know about you. Well, weather, as we said earlier, weather determines whether your days are slow or not. So we'll have to see, but I'm down.
Well, we should try to at least do one sometime before December.
That sounds
good.
And
then you got to get the holidays in there. Things get busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I know we're going to be invited to a lot of Christmas parties, you and me.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because of this podcast.
Yeah. Hint, hint. No, it's always a lot of fun. So thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.